Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And today we are going to be looking at the religion of science, faith, questioning, and the birth of the modern world, right? The religion of science, that's modern science. Has science become the world's new faith, the world's new religion? Now, a lot of people have very distinct views of religion, and people think that religion and science are separate or they're enemies. And are they just tools that people use to come to an understanding and an awareness of the world in which we live? So, when many people hear the word religion, they think of faith, tradition, and accepted beliefs. When they hear the word science, they often think of questioning, experimentation, and challenging established ideas. Yet the history of science reveals that these two forces have been deeply connected. The rise of modern science was not simply a rejection of religion. It emerged from a long tradition of inquiry, debate, and the search for truth. During the medieval period in Europe, often described as the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church held enormous influence over intellectual and social life. While this period is often portrayed as completely opposed to knowledge, the reality is more complex. Monasteries preserved many ancient texts, universities were established under Christian institutions, and scholars debated philosophy, nature, and the universe. However, the authority of religious institutions sometimes limited certain forms of inquiry when new ideas appeared to challenge established theological interpretations. One of the major turning points came with the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. Reformers challenged the authority structures of the Catholic Church and argued that individuals should engage directly with Scripture and develop a personal relationship with knowledge and truth. This broader culture of questioning authority helped contribute to an intellectual environment where challenging long held ideas became more accepted. Now, out of that, or out of these changes, came the scientific revolution and later the Enlightenment. Thinkers such as Galileo, Isaac Newton, Rene Descartes, and others transformed humanity's understanding of the natural world through observation, mathematics, and experimentation. The Enlightenment expanded these ideas into philosophy, literature, politics, and technology, encouraging societies to question traditions and seek evidence based explanations. And no wonder we are going through a system as we now see religion being thrown out of the bathroom, right? We are now seeing that people cannot question government anymore because everything is around the science. So we should listen to the science and we should accept the science. But the science according to whom? The foundation of modern science was therefore built on a principle that could be described as a religion of inquiry, not a religion based on worship or unquestioned belief, but a commitment to seeking truth, challenging assumptions, and refusing to accept claims simply because they came from authority. Contrary to the idea that science and faith have always been enemies, history shows a more complicated relationship. Many early scientists were people of faith who believed that studying the universe rather, was a way of understanding creation. The scientific method itself grew from a culture that valued reason, debate, evidence, and the courage to challenge the status quo. The true spirit of science is not blind acceptance, it is curiosity. It is the willingness to ask difficult questions, test ideas, and challenge or change our understanding when new evidence emerges. That spirit of questioning helped shape the modern world of science, literature, technology, and human progress. So we're looking at this because it's a very important topic to have and to explore, because we're living in a world now where people separate knowledge as one knowledge is over there. We don't understand that knowledge is a tool, and science is knowledge, by the way, right? La ciencia, that's what it was called, knowledge. So when we say knowledge, we have knowledge of the social world, we have knowledge of the physical world, and we have knowledge of the spiritual world as well. And all of these things are all of these are tools of knowledge. And we have to join all of them together in order to come to an understanding and awareness of what is truth. If we're just going to put ourselves and say, this is one way and this is my way of accepting it, no, right? Because we understand that human beings are made up of three components. You have the physical, you have the mental, and you have the spiritual. And science can help us to understand some of them, the physical, and also to some extent the mental, but not the spiritual. As some authorities in science says, science explains the process, religion explains why. I repeat that. Science explains the process, religion explains the why. So both are necessary, but both don't need to be competing, because when you're trying to seek knowledge, you're not trying to compete with your knowledge versus the other person's knowledge. You're trying to compare and contrast and to see how you can pool everything together to come to an understanding of the world in which you live. But we live in a very narrow world now where people think that they only use one lens to appear to a knowledge of the truth, and then they find themselves very actually limited in understanding what the world is. Let's look at some of your comments. I see that the thing is already hot. I tried really hard to push science, but I hit a wall of institutional cowardice, censorship, and most likely also surveillance. That's what Sadek is saying. Yes, what we're seeing now in modern science is that modern science that should be geared towards understanding, questioning, and not having this orthodoxy we're finding, particularly after the pandemic. But before the pandemic too, that was the case. We weren't aware of it, but it reached the apex of science becoming an orthodox religion, if you will. It showed itself during the pandemic, during the late COVID-19. So Sadek is saying, I'm a serious person. We interacted here many times. I know you are, and I remember you very well. Just a second, I will go to get the source image links and post it here in the live chat. All right, let's look out. I see other people too. Yes, welcome to the live session, everyone. Let me just begin with something. We're going to begin with redacted. We're going to begin with redacted, and we're looking at what happened during the pandemic and some things that they're questioning about it, and to see how even Clayton, and Clayton is not religious, is saying that science is in fact a religion, at least Western science as we know it today. So let's look at what he's saying, and then we're going to go and discuss other things as we move on into our
people stopped taking these untested gene therapy altering shots, but you'd be dead wrong about the whole thing. Just this week alone, the mainstream media is doubling down or pushing COVID shots once again on unsuspecting Americans. Just watch as MSNBC went all out on having an uneducated doctor on, telling that even pregnant women should be going out and getting these shots right now. Watch.
Dr. Adalja, first to you. There is a lot of confusion, as Marissa Para was reporting, around the COVID vaccine. As a doctor, please straighten it out for us.
And this is the absolute worst case scenario, because no one knows who should get a vaccine. No one knows who to trust. What I would say is that if anybody has any high risk condition, they should be getting the new vaccine when it's available. If you are a parent of a child and that child is less than 2 years of age and they have no risk factors for severe disease, even without any risk factors for severe disease, as you just heard, there is a high rate of hospitalizations. Those children should get vaccinated. And lastly, I would say pregnant women all need to be vaccinated with each pregnancy. There will be better guidance coming out from the professional societies, but the CDC guidance is likely to be very, very muddled and more confusing, leading to what's going on with these drugstores not actually offering vaccines.
To me, that's pure evil. But, you do you. They've never been tested on pregnant women. How the hell can you tell pregnant women to go out and get this thing? By the way, not just get one with every pregnancy that you have. Thank goodness our next guests are fighting the good fight to stop this tyranny. John Leake, Dr. Peter McCullough have just co-authored a brand new book called Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. You can buy it now. I just finished reading it last weekend, and holy smokes, is this thing a good book. You guys need to buy this book. I'll have a link in the description. And John and Peter, join me now. Guys, great to have you back on the show. Congrats on the new book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, first of all, just before we get into the book and we dive deeply into this, because it reads to me like almost like a history book, just to get your reaction, Doc, I'll ask your reaction, because as the MSNBC anchor there said, you know, doctor, straighten it all out for us. Make sense of this. What did you think of this new push for COVID vaccines here in the fall?
Well, you know, 5 years into the campaign, essentially no one is taking these shots anymore. The CDC stopped reporting who's taking the shots. They now just give a survey, so, you know, of what people's intentions are. And 97% of us have been through the illness. It's over with. And you can see now that the comments by the doctor who's at the Bloomberg School of Public Health for Johns Hopkins, a known vaccine promotional unit, heavily funded by Gates Foundation and other, you know, vaccine-aligned entities in this biopharmaceutical complex, you can tell at this point in time, the recommendations are simply unhinged, unending injections of messenger RNA with essentially no goal in sight.
John, your response to seeing that doctor pushing this. I mean, you've done so much work on this book, and then you hear the mainstream media is doing this big fall push again. What do you think, John?
Well, I hope I didn't interrupt. I was so stunned by the precise wording of the doctor. He started by saying, if I remember precisely, so if you have a child under 2 years old who has no risk factors, so, you know, that starts to sound like a qualification, but then he says he too should get it anyway. So it's as though it's some universal idea that just every man, woman, and child on earth should get this. And even if there are any questions that arise, does it really work? Does it really stop transmission? No, just get it anyway. And this is, interestingly enough, the doctor pointed out, this propaganda is coming from Johns Hopkins. I mean, this was Bill Gates's original announcement, or annunciation, I call it. You know, this new vaccine is coming. He made this announcement in April of 2020. And we're all locked down. The world's turned on its head. But when everyone gets it, then mankind will be liberated and saved. And here we are 5 years later, and it's the exact same messaging. This is very characteristic of an ideological representation, just a slogan, just get it, everyone get it. And this really drew us into this story. What is going on here?
So you write, I mean, vaccines, mythology, ideology, and reality, and it really reads like a history book, and it's like it's without politics. I mean, you really go back to sort of the foundations of these vaccines, and even the terminology of the term vaccine, where it comes from. And Peter, it almost sounds like it has become a religion for some people, and I think you saw that last night, or just you're here on an interesting week. We've got all this news happening with COVID, and then you see on CNN the other night this panel with Abby Phillips going crazy because Florida and Joe Ladapo down there has basically said no more mandates for vaccines.
All right, so we'll stop there for a while. We'll come back to this. But, you know, as Clayton is saying, that this whole matter of vaccines have become a religion, right? It is a religion. And it is not only the COVID-19 vaccines that we can say that is a religion. Ever since the history of vaccination, if you read the history of vaccination, you'll understand that there's nothing scientific about it. Right? And it's much more witchcraft, if you will, than what they're telling us is the science. But they tell us that it's a science. People believe that it is a science, and many people have been injected for many centuries, for many decades, vaccines, and they think that is the way to go. Is this modern science, or is this a religion? It is a religion. And why is it a religion? Because we are not allowed to challenge the status quo of vaccination. And that is what religion is all about. Blind religion is like that. Now, the whole matter of the Protestant Reformation was to challenge the status quo. Why do you think you have many different religious denominations, for example, under Christianity, because the Reformation allowed them to challenge. So those who were Lutherans became afterwards, they said, okay, we don't believe about Luther. We went to another, we formed another sect, and people formed sects upon sects. And we have how many now? Many hundreds of religious sects under the realm of Christianity, because that is how people challenge. You must give people the freedom to challenge orthodoxy in anything. And this is what we talk about, what you call faith and what you call, as opposed to what you call science. But many people think that science and religion are distinct. And people think that on science, people, are intelligent and they question and they observe, and this is the evidence. And oftentimes, is it the evidence, or is it the evidence according to what the authority tells us, right? And that is what we have to, we're here to explore and asking, is modern science really a religion, or is it science as it should be? And we're going to explore this topic for this afternoon's conversation. Now, this is an article I thought I would share with you. It says, Religion versus Science, the Myth of Conflict and the Truth About Believing Scientists. Despite popular belief, faith and science, let me get this off here, faith and science have never been true enemies. I repeat that. Despite popular belief or beliefs, faith and science have never been true enemies. Well, that's what we're told. Many of the world's leading scientists view their discoveries as evidence of divine order, not opposition to it. People often ask, who's right, religion or science? But why assume there is even a conflict between them? Where did that idea come from? If you ask someone a few centuries ago, who's right, religion or science? They would probably raise an eyebrow and reply, what do you mean? What's the connection between them? Why not ask who's right, the musicians or the doctors? The notion of a clash between religion and science was invented by the two 19th century American writers, John William Draper and Andrew Dixon White, who published books about the supposed conflict between religion and science. The idea caught on, and ever since, many have repeated it as if it were obvious, especially skeptics who find comfort in believing that science is on their side. Yet research shows that this belief is in conflict is held mainly by non-believers. A 2009 Pew Research Center survey found that only a small minority of scientists actually see a contradiction between faith and science. So a lot of science do believe in faith, but they don't necessarily tell us, just like during the COVID vaccine, right? During the COVID-19 pandemic, many scientists were opposed to what was happening, but they showcased the scientists who actually were agreeing. And the large numbers of them who did not agree with the protocols and what they were doing, what did they do? They ignored them. So we have in science today a lot of scientists who have faith and who believe in the Bible and other religions that they might claim to, but they cannot say that they do because they are living in that hostile environment in which scientists suggest that to be atheist is what you need to be. Most scientists understand that science explains how the universe works, not why it exists. I repeat that. Most scientists understand that science explains how the universe works, not why it exists. Science cannot answer why the universe exists. In fact, many world-class scientists are believers. And I'm going to break here for a second and ask you the question. During the pandemic, notice that the scientists were just telling us about the illness. They never asked, where did the illness come from? That was not their sort of emphasis. It was just to tell us, to describe to us this phenomenon, this disease, and then they're telling us that we need to go and take X, Y, or Z. Right? But they never cared about telling us why, right? And where did this illness come from, which was necessary if we were going to find a cure for it. Okay, so that's very important. We also understand, and this is the difference between what we call the religion of science versus science, versus scientism. Now, when the atheist writer Richard Dawkins claimed in 2006 that real scientists are necessarily atheists, that same year, 3 renowned scientists published books affirming faith. Harvard astronomer Owen Gingerich wrote that the God's universe, he wrote that's the name of the text, the God's universe, arguing that the cosmos was purposefully designed. Geneticist Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project, published The Language of God, and showing how nature's intricate order points to a creator. And the cosmologist Paul Davies released the Goldilocks Enigma. The Goldilocks, not the Goldilocks, but the Goldilocks Enigma, highlighting the universe's remarkable fine-tuning for life. So we're seeing here where we are hearing from one side of the coin, that science is nothing that we should listen to, right? That scientists are the ones who are intelligent, and people of faith are the ones who are not intelligent. But what we're seeing in today's world is a scientific community that is highly religious. And they are foisting, and religious is not one that is good, because we are talking about now true religion versus false religion, and we're looking at true science versus false science. And we must be able to distinguish between these two. Oftentimes, people just put them in just one box and say this is science or religion. But what you want is true religion versus true science. What we got during COVID, for the most part, was not true science. It was false science under the umbrella of religion, faith in a vaccine, faith in the protocols that they were telling you to follow. Right? And which people actually followed, even those who describe themselves as atheistic. Yet still, because you know one of the reasons? Because they just want to believe that science is the way to go, and science is not going to mislead them. Now, let's look at some of the clips of people, before I get to your comments, clips of what people are talking about, and the fact that there's no difference and there's no contradiction between science and faith and religion, if it is true religion. All right, so let's look at the science and the Bible. All right, let's look at that and look at what people are saying, other people are saying, so we can get an understanding. Because okay, go ahead.
The universe has a beginning. The Big Bang clearly points to the fact that the universe is not eternal. The universe has a beginning. And that's exactly how the Bible begins. In the beginning, God created. Secondly, science and the Bible agree. The universe is so finely tuned, it allows for human life to exist. If the universe were not so finely tuned, human life could not exist. But it's obvious that there's an intelligent mind who has brought such fine tuning to the universe that human life can exist. Science and the Bible agree. Information densely packed in the DNA of a single cell demands an intelligent mind. You cannot have information without a mind. And God is the most explosive mind in the universe. Science and the Bible agree. There has to be a creative mechanism. The problem is there's no creative mechanism in evolution. There are mutations, natural selection. There's adaptation, but there's no creative mechanism in evolution. The Bible insists there must be a creative mechanism, and that creative mechanism is a personal being, not a mechanism, the living God. Science and the Bible agree. Certain life forms are irreducibly complex. A single living cell is too complex to have evolved from one state to the next until it becomes a living cell. Instead, God created life. He created the living cell. Science and the Bible contradict each other in no way. It's the philosophy of science that contradicts the Bible. The philosophy of science says there is no intelligent mind behind this incredible process of science. The Bible contradicts that philosophy of science and says, in the beginning, God, not in the beginning, hydrogen.
Right. Now, we are seeing here that what he's saying, that science and religion are not in conflict. It's the philosophy that is in conflict. And that is what we have to do. We have to study the philosophy. And who is responsible for these philosophies and for these ideologies behind science? And why are they, conditioning the world, the entire world, particularly us here in the West? Why are they conditioning our minds that religion is not necessary today? Is it because they are following a religion that they want us to follow and become so atheistic minded that they're conditioning us to follow their brand of the new age religion, while they are able to trick us and to deceive us into doing what they want us to do? We have to ask these questions, because we are seeing now a set of young people going to college and they're learning that science and religion are contradicting or contradictory, right? That they can't work together. And what we're saying here, that these are tools of knowledge. We are using different tools to harness knowledge to understand the world in which we live. And science describes the process, how, right? As somebody said, and I think said eloquently, that God is the creator. He made works. Science is the work. The word of God is the word, and science are the work, or represent the works, and we are required to study the works. Now, if you read the Bible, for example, when Adam was created, right, God actually told him to name the animals and everything on the earth. God did not name these things, right? All of the different species of animals, of plants, and everything that you see here in the physical realm, Adam gave these things a name. Not because God didn't know the names for these things, right? So God is a master scientist, but he puts human beings over the works that he has made, that they can be occupied and they can develop their intellect. So when you say that science is what is intellectual, and God is, and the Bible is not intellectual, the word is what brought all of this thing into being. And then we are now required, the word having brought these things into being, we are required by the Creator to study them, so that our faith can be anchored in the fact that he is creator, right? So there is no, there is no contradiction between the word and the works created by the word, if you understand. And science represents the word. Okay, now there's something that some people were asking. I'm looking at this, where the crisis of biblical illiteracy in the Western world and in the world at large, right? Not only here in the West, but also in the world at large. Years ago, Raiders of the Lost Ark became a Hollywood blockbuster directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, an archaeology professor who scours the globe in search of ancient stolen treasure. The Lost Ark, at the heart of the story, of course, is the biblical Ark of the Covenant, the sacred symbol that guided Israel throughout the Old Testament. By the way, those of you who think that there is no flood, there was no flood too. Archaeologists, somewhere it was in Iran some years ago, that they found, planks of actually wood, the gopher wood that the Bible said that actually built that ark. And they're saying just one plank of that wood, several strong men had to carry. Why? Because back in those days, human beings used to be giants, right? They were much more powerful than we are. So you just had one plank, just a piece of gopher wood, and it required many strong men to lift that up. Now, we talk about the process of evolution, but human beings are devolving and not evolving. We are actually devolving. Now, scripture itself tells a Raiders of the Lost Torah story during the reign of King Josiah, and it goes on, the temple in Jerusalem had fallen into disrepair, both structurally and spiritually. As workers set about restoring the house of the Lord, they rediscovered the book of the law in a pile of dust and debris, forgotten and neglected for generations. Now, when God's holy word was read aloud to the king, Josiah was undone. He tore his robes in repentance, realizing how far the nation had drifted from God's covenant. That rediscovery sparked renewal. The young king of Judah initiated changes in the nation's worship practices and removed all traces of idolatry. He also called the people back to faithful obedience. The lesson is clear. When recovered, respected, and practiced, the Bible yields both personal and national transformation. And as we are now moving away from religion into science, and it's not science, it's scientism, witchcraft, right? A dark religion. Why is it that our society now is crumbling? And people are asking the question, why? Why? Why do we see so much evil in the world? Why are our politicians not transparent? Because we have nothing to hold them to account. Because science does not talk about morality and talk about what is true. Science just speaks about what we are seeing. So is it that they're lying to us, right? And when you look at their lies, because that's what you're seeing, their lies, you think that that is truth, when it is not truth. Now, today we face a similar situation in the church and across America. I'm not the first to raise concerns about the crisis of biblical illiteracy. Others describe it as a scandal, especially when churchgoers lose their Bible memory or develop a case of holy amnesia. So even the church, people of faith, don't have a good knowledge of the Bible, of religion. The Book of Books remains the best-selling book of all times. And why? Why is it that a book that has been rejected by so many people around the world, including now in the West, is still the best-selling book? Why? However, recent surveys suggest that the Bible is also the best-selling, least-read book of our generation. How can it be the best-selling, yet least-read? Why? Because you have thought that if it's a best-selling, people would be reading it. But no, the school system, the education system as it is weakening, sort of faith in the word of God, and the church too, for the most part. We should be concerned when people who should know better believe Joshua was the son of a nun and that Solomon and Gomorrah were lovers. When survey respondents insist that Joan of Arc was Noah's wife and that Golgotha was the name of the giant who slew the apostle David, church leaders should pause to examine our ministry methods, because something is wrong. Now, they go on to say that being biblical knowledge and having biblical literacy does not necessarily mean that you can just quote some scriptures and you can tell some stories. There's some people like, oh, you believe in those fable stories. It's not just about the stories, right? Because when we look at history, secular history also, we learn about stories, right? That's why we repeat them. Literature also, but it just does, well, when we read these stories, do we just dwell upon the stories, or do we look at the lessons of these stories, right? It's not just about some stories that the Bible gave, The Bible chose stories that are still relevant to human nature right throughout. Now, before we sound the alarm and declare a crisis, we should probably define biblical literacy, which goes beyond just factual knowledge and church attendance. The goal of biblical literacy isn't to win a game of Bible, Trivial Pursuit, or to score big in Jeopardy. Karen Engel agrees when she writes, and I quote, "Though drawing people into a church building is not a bad thing, sitting through a church service each week does not guarantee a person will go home with a better understanding of the book they dutifully carry to church, or God whose word it is. On the other hand, a biblically literate person knows how to rightly divide the word of truth, starting with an understanding of the big story of Scripture in all 66 books, from Genesis to Revelation, resembling the famous Route 66 from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California. So we need more to just sit and say that these are some stories, right? We need to understand the stories and how they apply to us. And one of the things that I see in our school system now, they're not teaching no longer critical thinking. Critical thinking is no longer a part of us. Now, could that be too that we are no longer reading the book of all books? Because in our world today, people are titled, right? They have lots of degrees, but they're not educated, right? They lack critical thinking skills, because when you think that you're going to read just what modern science tells you, and that's only one tool to gather knowledge, then you're not educated, right? You have to read all tools. We should be learning philosophy, religion, science, and science refers to what? Social science. You have the natural sciences, right? All of the sciences are what we should be studying. And we're not studying them, the humanities, right? When you look at language also, it's science unto itself. The grammar of the language, the morphology of the language, all of this is science. But we tend to see science as just something of biology and chemistry and physics, and that is what is science. But that is too narrow perspective to understand the world in which you live, right? It is good, it's one tool, but you can't say that it is the tool. It is the only tool in which you are going to gather knowledge. And for that reason, many people are going to be deceived. They are deceived in politics, they're deceived in economics, they're deceived in everything that we have here in society. Let's move back to some of the other clippings I've made about, and we're going to go back to what's his name, to Clayton, as we talk about the religion of science in our discussion today. Okay, because we have to ask the hard questions that people are no longer asking. Yeah, so let's go there and get some of the other opinions.
Science answering the question, how did this happen? And faith, for those who have it, answering the questions, why did it happen? And what does it mean for me?
Okay, so science describes the how, and religion or faith describes the why, right? That's what we have to understand. Do you know that also for geopolitics, that you're not going to understand geopolitics if you don't understand what is happening in religion? You're not going to understand it, right? Because all of that is actually intertwined, and that's why you have to learn everything. You've got to learn everything, because they're also following. Don't ever think that your politicians are not also following religious people who are informing their politics and their policies. They are. So if you don't listen to you, if you don't read for yourselves, then how are you going to know what they're doing and what policies that they are formulating? You don't know, because you think that they are dividing the world because they look as if they are not religious when they are. Okay, when they are, and then you are actually deceived. Even a lot of your scientists are very religious, but they might not believe in traditional religion, but they believe in witchcraft, they believe in voodoo, all these sort of Babylonian religions. So you've got to be careful. Let's look at Einstein and Isaac Newton and what they thought of science.
Why can't we have both? Let me break it down for you. Albert Einstein was one of the greatest scientists to ever live, right? He said, the more I study science, the more I believe in God. Also, Isaac Newton, one of the smartest men to ever live, he said that the thumb alone would convince him of God's existence. Max Planck, the founder of quantum physics, he said that both religion and science require a belief in God. Also, Werner Heisenberg, a famous physicist, he said that the first gulp from the glass of natural science will turn you an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. So, I believe in science too. It's a tool we can use to understand the beauty and complexity of God's creation. What do you guys think?
Right. So even most of the, ancient, the former scientists, some of the greatest scientists, the Isaac Newtons and the Einstein, they understood the existence of God and believed in God. Right? And they believed in God. But they have given us this impression now in modern times that if you are going to think religion, it means that you're simple, you're simplistic. And how many people are able to read the book of Revelation and Daniel and Isaiah and Ezekiel and give a great analysis of these books? Very few. Very few. Because it takes a lot of intellect to read these books and understand, especially when you go into the symbols and the history and the philosophy and the different countries and the different, all of the different, things that were in that society, and to be able to compare them with what is happening now. Because every Bible passage, for example, have some amount of message for modern times. Right? It's not just written for their times, it's written for our times, that we can learn, because it's human nature, and human nature never changes. Why do you think these empires rise and fall? They rise and they fall, and they do the same things over and over. Yet still, we never take stock, and we allow them to enslave us. And that is how the cycle runs, and it never ends, right? Because we always feel that we are brighter, better than the ones who existed before, when we are not. Because we're falling and making the same mistakes as they made, right? And that's what we have to understand. And one of the things that we need to learn is that science cannot teach us morality. It only teaches us about the works of the Creator, the works that he made, that we should study, so that our faith can be deeply grounded in him. That's what it's all about. It's not about that we are going to now study a work to magnify ourselves. And that is what is being done right now in modern science. And that's why people are behaving as if they are the gods, right? Because they think that, oh, I'm the one who invented this. I'm the one who did that. When the glory should be given to what? The Creator, the one who also impressed it upon your mind and gave you the ability and the wisdom and the knowledge to be able to invent whatever that you invented. By the way, human beings cannot create, because even though you might make a computer, or you might make whatever you are making, technology, whatever you're making, you have to have what? The raw material. And you can't make that raw material. Right? All the oil that they're looking for, the gold and all the minerals of this world, they cannot create it. They can try to go and dig it up, and that's why they're fighting over these minerals, right? Okay, but because they can't create it. They need to make things, to produce things, but they cannot create from zero, from nothing. Humans can't do that. With all the technology that they think that they have, and all the science that they think they have in their brains, right? They cannot even make a fly, right? Can't create a fly. So why are we thinking that these two are in opposition? They're not in any way contradictory or in conflict. True science, that is. Not false science, not the one that you're studying in school right now. True science, that which understands that it is not the originator, that there is an originator of all of what you're seeing, and that you can use now to study the works of the Creator. You can use these things to bless yourselves and to bless mankind. All right, now let's go to another video clipping before I come to your comments. Science and religion today. So we're looking at this. I know that for the Caribbean region, this is not, it's an intellectual topic, and you're not very intellectual in the region.
Discovery invites discussion, invites dialogue, it invites dissent.
Well, you just said something that's not quite right. I would say science should invite discovery, should invite dissent. But it's just the opposite.
It almost becomes religious at times from some people.
Exactly. It is a religion. What do you do when people start picking on your religion and you have not a good apologetic answer? You cry foul and you say you're coming at my religion, and you get violent and you try to shut them up because they're picking on your religion. And that's what they're doing in this area.
Right. Now, so we saw that during COVID. We saw that in school system right now. You can't speak anything about religion in this classroom, can you? Right? You can't, because they're telling you that this is not religion. Now, let me say something to you. If somebody the Bible itself is a literary, even though it's the book of all books, and it's a bestseller, it has remained the best-selling book for centuries, ever since it was published, right? Widely published. and that was from maybe the 16th century, right? The 15th, 16th century, it's still the best seller. That should, and even though it is the least read book, something should open your mind and say something is a little strange here. That this is the best-selling book, yet the least read book in the world. Something is interesting. Something is interesting, and something should captivate your attention, but humans don't like to think. Humans don't like to think. We just like to ride with the wind. We like to ride with what the world is saying and moving in the direction of what your friends are saying. And that sounds like it's intellectual to you when it is idiocy. Right? And that's what we have to learn. It's a tool that we have to use that is at our disposal so that we can understand thoroughly the world in which we live. Geopolitics, whether it is your health. And, people are talking about the matter of fasting, for example. Let us look at the whole matter of fasting that is practiced in faith, whether it's in the Muslim faith or you're a Christian. And people are now beginning to look at, scientists are now beginning to look at the importance of fasting and how it resets our physical health or organs and make us better. So it's not only faith-based, but it's also the body. It has to do with the body and how the body works, and that we should always be eating, round the clock, but that we should rest. Sometimes our bodies should have a rest. I told you about, for example, that Michael Hudson wrote a book on forgive them their debts. And he was using the biblical injunctions written in the book of Deuteronomy and how nations could forgive, indebted nations their debt. But guess what? People would rather look to the International Monetary Fund or the economists who are going to tell you something else in terms of development, and it sounds very nice, and you're reading these big fat books that are really not telling you anything how we are going to, forgive, and we are going to also get rid of our debt. Because the purpose of these school systems is to let you remain in debt, and so that you can be enslaved, right? And this is what we're saying here in terms of science versus religion. Do we understand it? Do we even understand what religion is about? Or do we just see it as something where you just go up and you dance and you sing hallelujah? Or are we talking here, just like science, about an intelligent, truthful religion or intelligent, truthful science, as we're not seeing at this moment? Let's continue to listen to some of what what's his name is saying, Clayton and Redacted, and where we're going, where we're heading, because we're not over with the scientism and the craze that you're seeing in the modern world. Science as we know it now is going to kill us. The science that we think is intelligent and we're worshiping right now, which is scientism, which is actually witchcraft, by the way, we are going to see that it's moving us to our untimely death. All right, it started in COVID-19 and it will continue. All right, let me get that video. It's to share my screen with Clayton as he continues his interview with Peter McCullough. Where is it now? It's right here. Let me get it on the screen, and we'll get there.
Vaccines in the state of Florida. Like, you can go out and get them if you want. You can get 30 of them if you want, but the government is not going to tell you to do it anymore to go to school. I mean, and people freaked out.
It's as if their religious faith has been shaken. And, we went all the way back to 1721. Cotton Mather, Puritan minister, takes up with Dr. Boylston in this process of variolation. It's an early form of inoculation using a scalpel and smallpox pustule from one person and inserting it into another through a skin nick. And Cotton Mather, 1721, proclaims this is a gift from God. So there's been connotations of religiosity with vaccination from the very beginning. And then these wild claims, even on the CNN panel, Scott Jennings, who's positioned to be kind of on the right, he's kind of the evening punching bag on that show. He says it's indisputable that the vaccines have saved millions of lives. And there's just no evidence of that being the case. For example, and people bring up measles all the time, that, with measles, Miller published in 1964, probably the best kept measles registry in the world, in the British Medical Journal, the actual death rate from measles. This is before the vaccines. And the rate was 0.2 per thousand. That's 1964. So if we had 500,000 measles cases per year in the United States with no measles vaccine, which could be the caseload, that would be essentially, 1,000 deaths. That's 1964 technology. That's before any measles treatment, where we have immunoglobulins, vitamin A, secondary antibiotics, steroids, ICU care. We should have zero measles death, even with no measles vaccine. Worldwide, a lot of people don't take the measles vaccine. The WHO reports 600,000 cases of measles sometimes in a year worldwide. People are making a big deal when we have 1,000 or 2,000 cases in the United States. But in my view, it's all about treating these illnesses. The vaccines can help reduce case count, but they're not a savior, and they shouldn't be held on to like a talisman.
We'll get back to the interview in a second.
Right,
but first, if you've watched the show for like the time, you know that we believe that history matters.
Even vaccination has a religious flavor. And if you read many things about science, you are going to realize that a lot of what you're hearing coming out of modern science and what you learned in school, you learned more of the philosophy of science, by the way. You didn't learn real science. Okay, and that is what we are looking at too, the fact that medications, when we look at medication in terms of what you should take, modern science says that you should take drugs. Drugs is what is going to heal you, right? And for people who read real science and true science and use natural remedies, even today, they are going to be described as witch doctors or those religious fanatics, right? Because they believe what should be done, right? Because when you take those, chemicals into your system, it's destroying your body. But you have a world now in which these people, these so-called doctors and modern scientists, believe that they're gods and that they can refashion the body. And I've heard even Nurse Campbell and other scientists are suggesting that even the V that you took the other day, that it was also changing your genes. It was refashioning, almost redesigning the genes that you have in your body, right? Which is going to be devastating. Human beings cannot create. Human beings cannot create. They can invent, but they cannot create. And that is what we have to understand. Science describes the how, while religion describes the why. Right? Why are we in this sort of global warfare that we're seeing now? People are confused. Why? If you read Revelation and Daniel, you'll see that why we're there. But you don't want to do that. You think that when I go and tune into that podcast and they're telling you the news that they don't even understand, because they don't understand prophecy, then you are just going to say, well, you're running here, running there, and you're never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Because the Bible did say that in the end of times, that people are going to be learning and learning, ever learning, and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. And that's science. They fooled you up telling you that the more you learn, the more knowledge you have. And nothing is wrong with knowledge, but that you must understand that knowledge has to be contextualized. It's a tool, and you can't just use one tool. You have to use many tools, including the tool of religion, science, and everything that you can actually compile to help you to understand a knowledge of the world in which you live. Other than that, you are going to be doomed. And ever running to read a book here, watch a podcast there, and you're not able to still come with a knowledge of the truth. Let's go now to some of the comments. I think I've spoken enough. Just a second, I will get a source you were telling me here. And then we have my challenge to the doubters is this: print the image, get a pen, and start drawing the outlines of literally everything. See what you come up with. Maybe it's just rocks, or maybe. And then we have here does anybody know a scientist who can verify anomalies in an image? Not sure. And then we have the vaccine messed me and my wife up. Wow. Right? So we have people who have been messed up by something that the scientists said. The scientists said it. Right? And that is what we are seeing right now. And by the way, even those people who might have been, some scientists are, they have good intentions. Don't get me wrong. They have good intentions. But if you don't have an abiding faith that there is something bigger than science, then you are not going to give anybody the right. You're just not going to come to a knowledge of the truth. Right? So there's some things that that is beyond our human ken to understand. Whether it's medication, whether it's a human body that contains trillions of cells, one human body having trillions of cells in that body. Not to mention our brain. Not to mention our brain. How intricate it is. I was listening to a video the other day of a Chinese scientist who is actually atheistic, because, well, he was, now he's a man of faith. But he said that he was a hard nut to crack because he never believed in this existence of God. But he is an eye doctor. And when he looks at the intricacies of the eye, just one part of the body, right? And they're talking about the entire body, and doctors have to go and they have to study, different parts of the body. It's so intricate. It's so complex. And that is what they have to do. So you are thinking that this is going to be explained away by some tools and some observation? Come on. You've got to understand that you have to go back to the maker. Just like when we have, if somebody produces a machine like a computer, whatever, the Mac computer, whatever brand of computers that they produce, you have to go back to that source, right? You have to go back to that source, of the person who created that machine, to ask certain questions, right? You can't believe that you know how to operate it and how to take care of it, okay? But we still think that you have this infinite universe, a complex human body, and we can actually know about it. All right, let me just go through a quick and probably end this live here. I'm not going to waste my time with you guys tonight. What side effects did you and your wife have? Somebody's asking. And then she's saying that they know the power of the human spirit and its desire to live beyond the physical and surpass the realm of current existence. Faith is what I'm talking about, and it is the difference between life and death. Correct. Nothing is wrong with science, as we're saying on this channel. We're not saying science is wrong, and we're just saying it is a tool, and these are the works. Science represents the works of a creator, of the creator, that we should study. But if we think we know it all, which many scientists think they do, and that is what happened during COVID, then their word is going to be the final word. And then when they tell you that you have to go that way, in that path, if faith is not considered to be necessary in a society, it means therefore the government is going to run into tyranny. Because the only reason why they did not run into tyranny during COVID was because there were people of faith who said that, no, my conscience does not tell me I should take that COVID vaccine. The large majority of the world had no other excuse. Do you know that? Just like during slavery. The only reason why slavery in the West here, particularly in the States, ended was because the Bible said every one of us are the same. And they could not say nay to that. But if they decide to destroy faith tomorrow completely, which they're doing, You and I are not going to have any excuse in terms of whether it's political excuse or scientific excuse. We will not have any excuse in terms of saying, no, my conscience tells me. I don't care, because you and I can't prove to them that the vaccines are not effective. You and I can't prove to them that millions of people have died. We can't. We can only hear and we can repeat what we have heard, but we can't prove to them these things. The only thing that we can say to them for them to listen to us is that our faith or our conscience tells us that this is not for us. And if we remove that barricade, that wall, then what is going to happen? We're moving to tyranny. Okay? We're moving into tyranny. And science is not going to save us from tyranny. Okay, because science, whatever science says, according to the scientists, according to the intellectuals, according to the scholars, right? That is what you will have to listen to. And that's exactly what we saw during COVID. But thankfully, a few people with their faith, while they a lot lost their jobs, but they were the only ones with balls. And that was the only wall that was set between tyranny and some level of democracy, which is fast dissipating. Control faith and you become God. So if those in control turn you to believe in them, absolutely, and a narrative that they manipulate via algorithm versus the media, etc., you will kill or become fodder for a higher cause. And I can say that even the guy there, Door, that guy, what's his name? The guy there with the podcast, Door, he said it well too. He said that now that they have weakened faith in God, people are now taking their politicians and their podcast people and all of these people as their gods. And by the way, I see a podcast on, coming out of the region saying, oh, we don't believe in religion, but they're always praying at the altar. Praying at the altar, but you don't believe it. So what's your faith? Who are you praying to? Who are you praying to? And many of you find it offensive when we talk about religion because you think that it doesn't exist. You don't have the aptitude to decipher what it is, but that is how you feel very offended. But you're not offended when the government actually destroys you and takes away your liberty. And by the way, let me just say here, religion of expression, that's why the founding fathers placed those four there in the First Amendment. Religion of expression and freedom of religion. They're all in that First Amendment to the Constitution. Because they realize that if any of these goes, the entire society is gone. If you don't have freedom of religion, it means you don't have freedom of conscience. If you don't have freedom of faith, you don't have freedom of conscience. It means, therefore, that the government can dictate to you and tell you whatever you need to do. Even if it's a religion, even if it is their religion, they can tell you that this is what you need to do. But if you have the free exercise of religion, then you can say, I want to be a Jehovah's Witness, I want to be a Muslim, I want to be a Hindu, I want to be that. And the government can't do anything about it. But they're removing that because our school system has destroyed the brains of people, letting them think that it is religion that's the problem. And science is what is going to solve the problem. And we haven't woken up because we didn't see that during COVID, but we still think so. We still think that modern science as it is now is going to save our planet and it's going to destroy you. Jihad is similar to this, hence why they will kill others or sell and be ready to meet their maker, correct? And this is what we have to discuss too in terms of false, true, and that is what this liberty helps us to do. It helps us to now discuss in terms of what these religions entail, right? And what might be the pros and the cons, just like in science, right? In science too, as a well-known religion, you have errors because you're talking about human beings. People are full of fear, and fear is the enemy of faith. Couldn't be well said. The only issue is most people say they believe in God, whatever God is said to be that point in time. Correct. But he's right here. The only people who stood up for the pandemic recently were people of faith who believed and said that my conscience forbids me to do that. They prove nothing. It is a proof that the science justifies for them to do things which harm themselves and others. Which that's why they say. They said that the end justifies the means. That is what modern scientists say. So they are saying, in order to get rid of COVID, you've got to give you the V. And even the V is going to kill you, but the end justifies the means. Because that is what is salvific. That is what is going to save you from a disease. That is what they have in today's world. Now, we have here, creation explains what science says in a more simple way, but science tells it more complex. Science, because what I'm, and you said it very well. When God created Adam and Eve, God could have named all the plants and the animals because he created them. So he knows all about them. Nothing that scientist says in chemistry or physics or whatever, God doesn't know because he created all of that. He created physics and the science and all of that. But what God did was that he delegated responsibility to Adam and Eve, Adam particularly, to name the things because he wanted them to study his works. The Garden of Eden was a school book. It was their school where they actually learned about the works of God. And that was science. Can you imagine? Adam was the one who named all of the species of animals. All the plant life he named all of them. And God agreed with him because that was a name that God impressed upon his mind to call them. Right? So there is no contradiction, guys. Once it is truth, there is no contradiction. But they're telling you in the secular world that there is, because the secular politicians are going to impose dictatorship upon you, tyranny upon you, if you decide that that is not something that you want to listen to and to understand. Because what happened? Many of us lack knowledge. And the Bible says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. The entire world is in a state where people are just dumb, and they don't want to learn. They refuse to learn. And that is the problem. That's why we're seeing the algorithm is going to feed you with nonsense, and then eventually the society is going to collapse. And we have anyone interested in creation versus evolution, look up Kent and his Hovind. Yes, and we should. And to end this program, there is a Bible verse here that says that there is coming a famine on the land, right? And the famine is not for drink or for food. It's going to be a famine of the word of God. People, they're going to destroy the word of God. It happened in history. Go and read the Dark Ages, right? Where you were not allowed to read the Bible at all. And maybe any other faith. I think perhaps they will even, take away other people's faith too. Whether the Quran and other books that other people, religious books that people read. They're going to take it away from you. Because what they want to do is for you to have no sort of, commitment or dedication to another source higher than the government. Right? That's what they're trying to do. They've destroyed every faith you have in God. So now they're putting it in them and in their system, technology, in AI. And some of the things you are about to see with your naked human eyes with AI and technology that they have there, you are going to be afraid. Right? Because you've never seen anything like that. Okay? So this is some of the things that we wanted to highlight. Just to let you know that nothing is wrong with religion. Nothing is wrong with true science. They don't contradict once they are truthful, right? Truth always aligns. Have you ever thought that somebody in India or somebody in Africa, somebody in, Europe, they're all saying the same thing? If it's truth, they might speak different languages. They might have different accents of English. But guess what? They're all saying the same thing in different words, in different languages too. Because it's a truth. And the truth is the truth. So if the truth is in faith, then the truth will be expressed in science and vice versa. But the Protestant Reformation that these people actually had, that was what catapulted the scientific revolution. So you think that science was what founded religion? It is the other way around, right? That Protestant Reformation, they said that everything, the Bible should be used as the standard of every knowledge and doctrine, even in scientific. If God says it, then that is so. If God didn't say it, then it is not so. So this evolution that they're talking about, let me just give you this about the evolution and show you how this guy is subtle. This white guy here is so subtle. I want you to listen to it and look at what he's saying about we're black people. Well, he sounded nice, right? Like he's sort of massaging black people's ego, you know, people of African descent. But let's look at what he's saying here, the theory of evolution, yeah. And it sounds good from a superficial, but look at what he's insinuating.
All Africans.
I'm a fairly recently retired professor, and I'm professorial enough to draw on this convenient whiteboard here. That is 6 million years ago, and that is the common ancestor of chimpanzees and bonobos and humans. That is about 7 million years ago, and that is the common ancestor of all those and gorillas. That's about 12 million years ago, and that's the common ancestor of all those and orangutans. Orangutans, as you know, are Asian apes. Gorillas, humans, bonobos, and chimpanzees are African apes. Darwin conjectured, long before there were any available fossils, that the right place to look for human fossils was Africa, and he worked that out by pointing out that humans most resemble the other African apes, namely chimpanzees, well, they didn't call them bonobos in those days, and gorillas. The reason that we know approximately the date of the common ancestor is molecular evidence comparing the genes, comparing the proteins of these various animals. It's possible to calibrate the date at which a common ancestor happened, and we can date the common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees and bonobos at about 6 million years ago. Unfortunately, there are no fossils down this line here, possibly because they're forest-dwelling animals. Nowadays, unlike in Darwin's time, there are quite a lot of fossils down this line here, and they're all in Africa. We've got the genus Australopithecus, sort of about halfway down, Ardipithecus there, and Homo habilis there, Homo erectus about there, and then Homo sapiens, archaic Homo sapiens there, and then modern Homo sapiens there. Lots and lots of little branches, quite well documented in the fossil record here, all extinct except the last one, Homo sapiens. You may have heard the phrase out of Africa. There were two out of Africas. Homo erectus, about a little over 1.5 million years ago, left Africa and colonized Asia and Europe, and arguably Indonesia as well. No, not arguably, definitely Indonesia. That's the first out of Africa. The second out of Africa is very recent, probably less than 100,000 years ago. If you look molecularly, if you look at the molecules of modern human races, they are astonishingly uniform, and such variation as there is mostly within Africa. So that suggests that the deepest divides of cousinship in our species are within Africa. The whole of the rest of the world is a very, very recent branch off the human species. If you look at the amount of variation in the human species genetically, it's extremely low. We are a very, very uniform species compared to other species, even chimpanzees. It's been said that if you take two chimpanzees from the same forest in Africa, they're likely to be more different from each other genetically than any two humans in the world. It's a bit surprising when you consider that we, to our eyes, at least look more different. But the genetics is very clear that we are an astonishingly uniform species. We are all one species, one very uniform species, and we originate very recently in Africa. We are all Africans.
Thank you.
Right. So from, many people, I know that were people, particular people of African descent, like everybody's black and everybody is from Africa. And so it sort of supports their sort of analysis. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at his discourse, it's almost that, he's confirming that we came from chimpanzees. They're the lowest, ebb of that. And that, they probably evolved into looking like humans, and we were at the base of civilization. And then he doesn't understand that had he done a thorough reading of the Bible, that there is no surprise that all human beings are similar in shape and form. Well, not in shape, but in form, because God made us. We came from Adam and Eve. We came from one parent. Right? So to him now, but the chimpanzees, even though we came from those sort of species, whatever species of chimpanzee that we've come from, that we've been derived from, right? They have different, species and genealogies and whatever he's suggesting. Okay? Yet still the Bible is saying that we came from one parent. Right? So it's not hard, and it's not that it's not complex too. It is complex, because when you look at the fact that from one parent, and you have all of these cultures and human shapes and the shape of the eyes and the texture of the skin and all of that, right? This is where now the complexity gets. And we can talk about the environment, how the environment, has shaped the way in which we look, but still coming from the same parent. And if he just had accepted that rather than going, it's millions of years ago, then he would not be speaking of the fact that it is surprising, because it's not surprising to somebody of faith. It is not surprising. Okay? But that's what he thinks. All right. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk another time. All the best. Bye-bye.